Welcome back to the radio. What time is it where you are tonight? And where are you listening from? Whether you're tucked into a warm bed or sprawled out on a couch that's seen better springs, I'm glad you made it. Tonight's story takes place in the year 1349. The air smells like smoke and pine. Your armor is dented in 4 places, and your legs feel like they've been carrying the entire kingdom for 3 years. But here, near the fire, things feel quieter. The war is far away, or at least far enough not to interrupt. You've slept in ditches, under carts, and once in a grain barrel that turned out to be full of weevils, so a bonfire and some silence feel like a luxury suite. Without further ado, let's begin. The trees arch above you like tired arms, limbs nodding into dark silhouettes against the early night. The last of the sun is a faint smear of gold behind you, too far to matter now. The path leading into the clearing is slick with mud, not from fresh rain, but from the hundreds of quiet footsteps that came before yours. Boots that marched. Boots that ran. Boots that never walked back out. Yours keep moving anyway, though each step sounds more like a sigh than a stride. The dull weight of your armor presses into your shoulders, more cloth and rust than steel at this point, but it still creaks like it remembers how to be terrifying. You adjust the strap across your chest, not for comfort, but for the illusion of control. The forest has gone quiet. Just the faintest hiss of wind above, and the slow grind of your own breath. Then, a flicker. Orange light, low and steady, just beyond the last row of trees. You slow your pace, though not out of caution. Just habit. You pass between 2 crooked trunks, and the clearing opens before you like a secret reluctantly shared. The bonfire is small, but confident. It burns with a practiced kind of grace, not roaring, not struggling, just existing exactly as it means to. Its light spills across the clearing, casting soft shadows on the moss-covered stones and the uneven patches of grass that make up the floor of this impromptu camp. The air smells of pine smoke, burnt bark, and damp wool. You pause at the edge, letting the heat from the fire reach you first. It grazes your cheeks, warm and dry, like a hand brushing your face, to remind you you're still here. You step in fully now, the mud on your boots giving a reluctant squelch as you cross the threshold into the light. There are no tents, no flags, no other figures. Just the fire, a log laid half-heartedly near it, and the faint remains of someone else's dinner, a bowl, a crust of bread, a folded cloth that might have been a napkin or just an old rag pressed into service one last time. The log looks reasonably intact, split clean, smoothed by weather and use, still wet in one corner. You lower yourself onto it slowly. The armor shifts with a chorus of groans. Your knees crack. The log groans back, politely. You settle in. For a while, there's nothing. Just the fire, crackling in a language you don't speak but somehow understand. The heat crawls up your shins, seeps through the worn leather of your gloves, softens the stiffness in your fingers. You stretch your legs toward the flames. Your left boot, the one with the broken seam and the flapping sole, falls open slightly. You wiggle your toes. One of your socks has a hole. It's probably always had a hole, but now you have the time to notice it. Across from you, a stool sits at an aggressive lean. It has 4 legs, technically, but the 4th seems to have given up sometime last autumn. The whole thing lists to the left, like a drunk at vespers. There's a mug on top of it, turned upside down, probably to keep out bugs, rain, or divine judgment. You stare at it for a long moment, then let your gaze drift upward. The sky's barely visible through the branches overhead. but you spot a few stars stubborn enough to shine through. They don't twinkle. They just sit there, watching, indifferent. You reach into your side pouch and pull out a rag. Not because you need it, just because your hands miss doing something. You wipe a spot of grime off your gauntlet and stop halfway. What's the point? The grime has probably earned its place more than you have. You put the rag back. To your right, a pile of stones is stacked in a rough little tower, 7 high, carefully balanced. You wonder who built it. A soldier passing through? A monk? A child who wandered too far and decided to leave a mark? It stands just tall enough to be intentional, but not tall enough to matter. You stare at it longer than you should, trying to guess the story behind it. Eventually, you give up. Like most things in the war, it makes more sense when you stop asking questions. A beetle, fat, dark, and with the absolute confidence of something that's never been drafted, scuttles past your boot. It climbs a twig, pauses, and falls off with all the grace of a man sneezing during a sermon. You watch it flip itself over and continue as if nothing happened. You find yourself slightly jealous. The fire shifts again. A knot in one of the logs snaps with a sharp crack, sending a small shower of sparks into the air. They rise like tiny spirits, trying to remember how to fly. You follow them upward until they vanish into the canopy. Somewhere out there, owls blink. Or maybe they don't. Maybe even owls are tired of watching men sit beside fires pretending they aren't scared. You exhale. It comes out slow, heavy, the kind of breath that feels like it took days to gather. You let it all go at once. The pain in your legs, the dust in your throat, the noise from weeks ago that hasn't stopped ringing in your ears. You don't need to make decisions right now. You don't need to lead, or follow, or fight, or flee. You just need to sit. And sit you do. Your sword leans beside you, its tip half sunken into the soil. You reach for it, only to adjust it slightly. It doesn't need to be ready. Not tonight. Not here. If someone meant to harm you, they'd have done it by now. Or maybe they took one look at you, slumped, filthy, covered in dried sweat and bent chainmail, and decided you weren't worth the effort. The flames begin to settle into a rhythm. Low, steady, almost like breathing. You match it unconsciously. Inhale when it crackles. Exhale when it fades. You've forgotten what quiet feels like. Not the silence of dread or anticipation, the real quiet. The kind that doesn't expect anything from you. You shift slightly on the log. One of your leg plates pinches your calf. You adjust. It doesn't help. Still, you don't move much. The idea of motion feels abstract now, like something you'll consider again next week. Night deepens. The clearing holds its warmth. Somewhere in the woods, a bird calls once and is answered by nothing. Even nature seems too tired for conversation. You stare into the fire again. It stares back. And for once, neither of you blinks. The fire has claimed the center of the clearing, but the space around it is still waiting. You rise slowly from the log, joints stiff and mildly insulted at the suggestion of movement. One hand presses against your thigh to push yourself up. The armor shifts reluctantly. You exhale through your nose, not quite a sigh, not quite a complaint. Your boots press into soft earth as you begin to walk the perimeter. There is no purpose to your steps. No scouting. no defense. You are simply moving, letting the air circulate, letting your feet remember the shape of still ground instead of torn roads and broken fields. On your left, a ring of low stones outlines the edge of the fire pit. Someone once arranged them with care, not a military hand, but maybe a farmer or a merchant with a taste for neatness. You toe one of them gently. It wobbles, then settles. Still holding. Still trying. Beside the stones, the remnants of a satchel lie, curled like shed skin. The leather's cracked and sun-bleached, the buckles tarnished green. A bit of frayed cloth sticks out from the top, blue, or what used to be blue once. You crouch slightly, knees making their usual objections. You don't touch it. You've touched enough abandoned things to know when something's better left to rest. A few paces beyond, a rusted helmet lies half buried in leaf litter. The crest is broken clean through. You can still see the faint impression of what might have once been a lion or a bird, depending on your optimism. Moss is creeping up the edges, claiming it slowly, gently. You stare at it for a moment and feel nothing. No grief. No fear. Just a passing recognition, like seeing an old neighbor's house, now empty, curtainless. To the right of the fire, someone built a crude lean-to with branches and a blanket. It's barely holding together. The blanket flaps weakly in the wind, though there's not much left to flap. It's been patched so many times it now resembles a map more than a piece of cloth, a patch for every place it's been. You step close enough to see that the inside still smells faintly of smoke and wet wool. No one inside. Just a pile of flattened grass and a wooden spoon. You move on. At the edge of the clearing, the forest presses close. The trees here grow dense and crooked, with trunks that twist as though they've been turning slowly to listen. You run a gloved hand along one. The bark is cool, damp, rough like burlap. You press your palm flat against it, and for a moment, it feels like the tree breathes back. Not far from the tree, a small mound of dirt looks disturbed. Fresh, even. Not enough for a grave, maybe an animal digging, maybe a root pulled up in a storm. Still, you give it a wide berth, just in case. The air around it feels heavier, not ominous, just tired. As you return toward the fire, you notice a strange little arrangement at the foot of a stump. Someone has placed 3 sticks in a triangle, with a flat rock in the center. On the rock sits a dried apple core, hardened to the point of sculpture. You kneel slightly, not to investigate, but to appreciate the absurdity of it. A battlefield shrine? A child's forgotten game? A very formal offering to a very small god? Either way, it's the most organized thing you've seen all week. You poke the triangle gently with your finger. It holds. Someone cared enough to make it balance. That has to count for something. As you straighten again, a breeze shifts through the clearing. It rustles the treetops, presses against your back, and carries with it a faint scent, something like lavender and smoke, or maybe just your imagination trying to remember how gardens used to smell. You close your eyes and let it pass through you. There's a sound from above, a creak, a groan, something large shifting. You glance upward just in time to see a squirrel knock a small branch free as it scampers overhead. The branch lands with a soft thwack near your foot. The squirrel freezes, as if unsure whether it's just committed a war crime. You nod solemnly at it. The squirrel flees. Near the fire, someone has placed 3 large stones in a rough circle. They don't match. One is dark and jagged, another pale and smooth, the third a reddish sandstone chipped at one edge. You sit briefly on the nearest one. It's cold and damp, and offers no support whatsoever. Still, you stay. A few feet away, the old stool sits at its familiar tilt. You give it a second look. The cloth folded atop it is thicker than you thought, maybe a cloak, maybe someone's coat. You reach for it and give it a light tug. It slides easily into your hand, surprisingly dry, brown with a faded blue stripe near the hem. You run your thumb along the stitching. Careful, even. Someone once took pride in making this. You drape it back across the stool and step away. You don't want to wear someone else's warmth. Not tonight. You wander a bit more, letting your fingers brush tall grass, the edges of bark, the occasional smooth surface of a buried rock. Everything here feels worn but alive. Nothing sharp, nothing broken in anger. Just time doing what time does, softening edges and forgetting names. As you pass by the fire once more, you notice a set of footprints leading away into the woods. Barefoot, wide set, turned slightly inward. Not fresh, but not old either. You follow them for a few steps, then stop. You've done enough following lately. Enough chasing. Enough leaving. Tonight, you stay. You turn back and settle once again by the fire. It welcomes you as if you never left. You place both hands near the flames, palms open, fingers splayed. The warmth seeps in again, as if recognizing its work from earlier. You shift slightly on the log and exhale. The beetle from earlier is gone. So is the squirrel. The trees have gone back to their watching. You let your head tilt back, letting your gaze find the stars again through the gaps in the branches. They're a little clearer now. Still indifferent. Still watching. But tonight, you don't mind. You shift your weight on the log, feeling the fire's warmth along your legs, while the air behind you stays cool and damp. When you reach into the interior pocket of your cloak, a hidden fold stitched long ago during a windstorm and a moment of practical panic, your fingers land on a familiar texture. Coarse linen, softened by years of being handled and crammed into corners of bags. The pouch is no larger than your palm and smells faintly of beeswax and dust. The stitching is uneven, like someone finished it in the dark or during a gallop. You loosen the top, careful not to spill anything, though you're not sure the contents are anything you'd cry over if they vanished. Inside are a few small items, the kind you've carried across borders and seasons without thinking. There's a pinch of salt, old and slightly clumped. There are 2 smooth stones, one gray, the other with a pale stripe across the center like someone split the sky and caught a piece. And there's the wooden dog. You tip it into your palm, turning it over slowly. It's simple, carved from cheap pine with clumsy knife marks still visible along its sides. The legs are blocky, the ears uneven, and the tail curls awkwardly as though the carver gave up halfway through or reconsidered the anatomy of dogs altogether. Still, it holds a kind of quiet dignity, the way all small, stubborn things do when they've survived this long. You don't entirely remember where it came from. Maybe a village kid gave it to you after you helped repair a fence. Maybe it was left in a camp you passed through and no one claimed it. There's always the possibility you carved it yourself one restless night and forgot you did so, which would be troubling, but not out of character. Whatever the origin, it's become a fixture in your belongings, tucked into bags, pressed against bread loaves, and once lodged unintentionally inside a boot for 2 full days. You remember that walk. You limped like a man twice your age and cursed like a soldier, which you were, so it worked out. You place the figure gently on your knee, where it sits upright in the firelight, gazing ahead with the blank, mild concern of something that doesn't understand war but knows it's unpleasant. There's a comfort to its stillness. You find yourself speaking to it without much intention. You comment on the weather. You note the fire's strength tonight. You tell it the stool behind you is a trap and not to trust it. The dog offers no response, which feels like a kindness. You let it stay there while you return your attention to the rest of the pouch. The striped pebble catches the light as you roll it between your fingers. It's soft and worn from endless handling, a worry stone in the most literal sense. You've held it during battles, during moments of boredom, and once while listening to a man explain how he intended to marry a woman he hadn't yet spoken to. You remember thinking the stone had more chance of success. The salt, though hardened, is there for tradition more than anything. Someone once told you it keeps bad luck away. Someone else told you it invites it. You've kept it just in case both were right and cancel each other out. You return the pouch to your pocket and lean forward slightly, elbows on knees, watching the carved dog sit motionless on your leg. The fire crackles softly, and the air smells of pine resin and faint char. Across the clearing, a tree leans at an angle that suggests it has opinions, but chooses to keep them private. You listen to the fire, to the shifting logs, to the occasional rustle of something unseen in the underbrush. You feel neither hunted nor alone, just placed. As though you've been set gently into this space for a while to do nothing in particular. Your gaze drifts to the fire ring again. At the outer edge is a flat stone, set deeper into the ground than the others. It doesn't match the rest, smoother, more deliberate in shape. You rise slowly, bones complaining as usual, and walk toward it. The dog stays behind on the log, maintaining its vigil. As you crouch beside the stone, you notice it's been engraved. Not deeply, just shallow markings in a clumsy hand. A few initials, maybe, or a symbol. A circle intersected by a line. Possibly someone's idea of a sun, or maybe just a target. You touch it lightly with one gloved finger, feeling the coolness of the surface and the slight dips where the carving lies. Whoever made it didn't mean for it to last. And yet, here it is. You sit back on your heels and stay there for a minute, breathing in smoke and cold air. There's a quiet weight to this part of the clearing, not heavy, but grounded. Like the land itself remembers something and chooses not to share it. You stand again and return to the log, where the dog is waiting precisely where you left it. You nudge it once with your finger, and it rocks slightly, then steadies itself with more confidence than you've felt in weeks. You decide to take that as a good sign. You pull your cloak tighter and sit back down, adjusting the angle until your spine is more or less convinced of your intentions. The fire is a little lower now, more ember than flame, and it glows warmly against your face. The dog is in your hand again. You turn it once more, and for no particular reason, you press it against your chest and hold it there. The wood is warm from your palm, and its awkward little ears press into the fabric of your shirt like they're listening. You hold it a moment longer than you meant to. The memory comes soft, like fog rolling into a valley. A bench near a cottage. Not your cottage, and not a place you ever stayed long. But there was a dog there, shaped vaguely like this one, always asleep, always shedding. It followed the man who baked bread. Or maybe the woman who mended cloaks. You can't quite place it, but the smell of the air comes back, bread, ash, wool, and the dog's breath. You remember laughing once, when it stole half a sausage, and the cook threatened to conscript it. You remember thinking the dog would have made a better officer than some of the men you'd met. The moment passes. You blink. The fire pops again. The dog is back on your knee, and the clearing hasn't changed. But something in your chest feels different. Not heavier, not lighter, just a little more settled. You take in a slow breath and let it out through your nose. The pouch stays in your pocket now. The dog stays on your knee. And the fire, still warm, keeps on burning. You remain seated, not because you're tired, though you are, but because stillness feels like the only reasonable thing to do. The fire has burned down to its patient center now, all glow and pulse, less about light and more about warmth. You shift slightly on the log, finding a comfortable angle for your back and settling your hands in your lap. The carved dog remains on your knee, perfectly balanced, as if it too understands that this is no time for action. There's a rhythm to the clearing now. Not a noise, not quite, but a steady presence. The kind of quiet that isn't silent, just complete. Your breath joins it. In, through your nose, cool air, tinged with smoke. Out, through your mouth, warmer now, as if your lungs have softened it. You do it again and again, not because you think about it, but because that's what stillness asks. To be noticed only when necessary, and then forgotten again. The weight of your armor no longer feels like burden. It's not pressing or digging, just resting where it always has. Your shoulders have stopped trying to rise. Your jaw is loose. The tension that usually takes up residence behind your eyes has stepped out for a walk. You don't reach for anything. Don't adjust your cloak. Don't scratch the itches that will come and go. You just sit, as if rooted, as if someone drew you in place and then walked away. The woods breathe slowly. You hear the wind move through the leaves like a faraway tide, rising and falling, never hurrying. The trees creak occasionally, but not with strain. They sound like old houses in the early morning, not unsettled, just remembering. A twig snaps somewhere in the underbrush, but it doesn't break the spell. Even the creatures of the forest seem to understand that this part of the night is sacred in a quiet, unspoken way. Your eyes are open, but unfocused. The fire blurs at the edges, shifting from defined logs to soft orange and red shapes. It reminds you of the way light used to fall across your bed in the early hours of winter mornings, when the sun was barely trying but still showed up. You always woke before it did, always waiting for it to catch up. Something shifts in your lower back. Not pain exactly, more like a creak in a stairwell you haven't walked on in a while. You don't mind it. You barely register it. You've begun to forget the names of your joints anyway. Knees become hinges. Ankles become ideas. The parts of you that usually demand attention have quieted down as if grateful for the break. The carved dog hasn't moved, and you still haven't put it away. It's become a placeholder now, anchoring you to this moment. You imagine for a moment that it's breathing with you, not literally, just in rhythm. You're not the sort of person who gives in to magical thoughts, but stillness has a way of making things seem possible that wouldn't pass muster in the daylight. The temperature dips slightly, enough that your breath becomes faintly visible. You watch it curl in front of you like a smoke signal to no one. You pull your cloak a little tighter at the neck, but make no further movement. The cold isn't cruel tonight. It simply is. And you, for once, don't mind being in agreement with the air around you. The wind brushes past your ear, gently, like someone whispering a secret they don't expect you to understand. You tilt your head slightly, as if listening. Not because you expect words, just because it feels polite. Somewhere to your right, an owl gives a single low call. It's answered a few moments later by a softer one, farther away. You find yourself smiling just a little. Even the owls are having a slow conversation. The shadows from the fire shift now and then, growing longer, then shorter, then longer again. You watch them without thinking, as if they're part of a performance only the exhausted can truly appreciate. Your mind isn't empty, but it's not full either. Thoughts drift through like guests at a long banquet, quiet, well-behaved, unlikely to cause a scene. You notice one about food, the idea of bread with honey, or maybe warm stew, but it fades quickly. Not a craving, just a memory that passed through without knocking. You place a hand over the pouch in your cloak pocket, not to check it's still there, but as a kind of brief acknowledgement. The dog stays where it is. The fire continues to settle. The night thickens but doesn't close in. You are here, and that is enough. Somewhere in the trees, something falls. A pinecone, maybe. A small branch. You don't turn to look. If it wanted your attention, it would have landed on your head. The world is full of things that have the decency to collapse in private. You let your eyelids drop for a moment, not sleeping, not even resting, just closing the windows for a breath or two. Behind them, nothing stirs. No colors, no shapes. Just dark, warm, and still. You open them again, slow and steady, as if even blinking deserves ceremony now. You realize, after a while, that your shoulders haven't moved in some time. Neither has your jaw. Your legs are stretched slightly, your heels resting in the dirt. The soles of your boots are coated in dust and ash, and it looks deliberate, like something someone might paint if they were trying to capture peace without using the word. The fire gives a final sharp snap, and one of the smaller logs splits. Embers drift upward, tiny orange messengers with nowhere particular to be. You follow them with your eyes, but not your head. It's too comfortable where it is. There is no time in this clearing. No urgency. No sequence. The moment has expanded to fill every corner, like water in a shallow bowl. You wonder, distantly, how long you've been sitting. Minutes? Hours? A whole night? And then, the thought lets itself out quietly, leaving no need for an answer. The carved dog leans slightly, just enough to suggest the knee beneath it isn't as level as it used to be. You adjust it with one finger, gently. It rights itself without protest. Your eyes close again. Just briefly. Maybe longer this time. If this story has brought you even a small sense of calm so far, consider subscribing to Quilloren Radio. Every night, a new quiet world waits, just like this one, ready to carry you deeper into rest. And if you're still awake, let me know where you're listening from in the comments below. The stillness lingers, but your thoughts begin to stretch, slow and unhurried, into places you haven't visited in a long time. Not with purpose, not even with intention. The fire remains your anchor, steady and constant, but the mind, now softened by warmth and silence, begins to drift. It's not a leap, not a jolt, more like a slow tilt, as if your memories were always just waiting around the bend of your breath. You think of the town you were stationed in before the last campaign. A walled place, modest and uneven, with more goats than roads and a habit of smelling strongly of onions by mid-morning. You never figured out why. The buildings leaned into each other like they were gossiping. Half the windows had shutters that didn't close. The other half didn't have shutters at all. The people mostly kept to themselves, except when they didn't, and then they were loud in that comforting way, like distant thunder that never gets closer. You'd been sent there to guard a granary that had already been looted twice by people who claimed to be guarding it also. It was a bureaucratic comedy that no one found especially funny. Your orders were clear, though not urgent, and for several weeks your primary duty involved making sure no one borrowed the grain sacks without written permission from a clerk who only appeared on Tuesdays. You stayed in a cramped stone room above a cooper's workshop. The stairs to your door were crooked, and the ceiling had a beam positioned exactly where your forehead liked to be. Every morning you hit it. Every morning you swore. And every morning you promised to duck tomorrow. You never did. The cooper's apprentice, a boy of about 12 who had the patience of a grandfather, started leaving you a piece of dried fruit on the ledge outside your door. He said it was for the swelling, in case today's beam is worse than yesterday's. Your uniform, during that posting, was cleaner. You washed it often, with a kind of naive hope that staying neat might ward off the reality of what came next. You even tried to brush your boots, though the dust in that town had the personality of a stray cat, clingy, unshakable, and always coming back. The commander was a man who shouted at walls when no one was around. His second-in-command had a collection of spoons he swore were enchanted. You pretended to believe him because it made him happy, and also because he outranked you. You remember the bakery at the edge of the southern wall. It sold flatbread and honey cakes, and something they insisted was cheese, but might have just been regret shaped into a wedge. The baker wore a scarf year-round and never used the front door. You only found that out because you waited 3 days to meet him and finally realized he lived in the attic and used a rope ladder. You bought bread every morning from his niece, who could count change faster than anyone you'd ever met and once told you that your eyebrows made you look like a troubled monk. You never quite got over that. Most evenings, you sat near the edge of the grain yard and watched the sun disappear behind a line of crooked sheds. Chickens wandered through the fences like they owned the place. Sometimes a fiddler would appear, no one knew from where, and play the same 3 songs with such melancholy you began to suspect he was in mourning for the 4th. You didn't ask. Some things are better left mysterious, or at least unexplained enough to pass for poetry. You weren't especially good at the job. You never were. You showed up, did what was asked, and filled in the reports with enough detail to seem reliable but vague enough that no one could question your methods. Once, you fell asleep while guarding the northern gate, and were woken up by a dog licking your boot. You later discovered the dog had also chased off 2 men trying to steal a cart of onions, thus rendering it more effective than your entire squad. The dog was never promoted. The report was never filed. You liked that town more than you admitted. Not because it was peaceful, it wasn't, and not because you were happy, you weren't. But it had a rhythm that matched your own, mildly confused, a little off, kilter, and generally forgiving of mistakes if you looked tired enough. No one expected heroism. No one handed out medals. You were mostly thanked in the form of awkward nods or extra crust on your bread. Eventually, the orders came. A new post, further east, more urgent this time. There were rumors of movement, of skirmishes near the border. You packed quickly, gave the cooper's apprentice your extra blanket, and promised the baker's niece you'd try not to ruin your eyebrows further. You left the town in the early dawn, before the sun rose, before the fiddler played, before the chickens made their rounds. No one saw you go, and that felt fitting. You think of it now, not with longing, not with regret, but with the kind of softened clarity that only comes after time has done its work. The names blur. The faces, too. But the feel of the stone steps, The sound of boots on dry dirt, the smell of burnt bread and sawdust, those stay. You wonder, briefly, if the cooper ever finished that barrel he complained about. Or if the niece still thinks about eyebrows. You hope so. You like to think you live on somewhere, in small, odd memories, even if no one remembers your name. The fire crackles again, and the present returns slowly, like someone easing open a door. Your breath is steady. The night is quiet. The carved dog is still on your knee. Nothing has changed, and everything has. The past hasn't visited to stir up trouble, it just stopped by to sit beside you for a while. You don't speak to it. You don't need to. It knows its place. You lean back slightly, shifting the weight in your spine, and close your eyes just for a moment. And the granary town fades back into the dusk. The breeze moves again, curling through the clearing like a careful hand smoothing out a blanket. It stirs the edge of your cloak, lifts the ends of the burnt grass around the fire pit, and carries with it a scent that catches you off guard. Not sharp, not heavy, just a trace of something sweet and old. Apples, maybe. Not fresh ones. Baked. The kind left too long in the sun on a wooden table. It brings with it a feeling, not quite memory yet, but close. You don't chase it. You just let it come, as if the scent were a rope pulling you softly backward through time. The fire holds steady beside you, your seat still firm beneath you, and yet something tilts gently. Not the world, not the air, just the mood. And you're no longer in this clearing. You're somewhere else. It's a kitchen. You know the sound before you see it. The dull thump of a heavy spoon scraping the bottom of a pot, a rhythm too casual to be rushed. You're standing near the doorway, boots cleaned but still damp from outside, hands not yet washed, deciding whether to speak or wait for someone to notice you. The light in the room is low, late afternoon yellow. Outside the window, leaves flap against the glass like lazy birds. You think it must be autumn, but you don't remember anyone saying it out loud. The person at the hearth doesn't turn around, but you know who they are. They're stirring a pot with the kind of slow concentration that suggests this task is less about cooking and more about not thinking too hard. You know that posture. You've worn it. It's the kind of stance you take when your hands need something to do because your mind isn't ready to be left alone. The table behind you is cluttered in that ordinary, comfortable way. A basket of potatoes still wearing bits of soil, a knife with a notch in the handle, a candle stub that never quite burned straight, a piece of folded cloth with the corner tucked under a mug like it's been asked politely to stay put. You can smell broth and smoke and something faintly herbal, thyme maybe, or rosemary, though you're not the sort who can always tell the difference unless someone holds them under your nose and makes you guess. You sit at the bench without being invited, because the rules in this space never required one. The wood is cool beneath your hands, worn to a smoothness that speaks of hundreds of similar moments. You glance toward the cupboard with the broken hinge. It's still broken. You remember someone swearing they'd fix it before the next rain. You also remember the rain came and went. Several times. A sound pulls your attention. A slight clatter, the spoon hitting the rim of the pot. The person at the hearth finally turns, but in the way of dreams or distant memories, their face doesn't quite come into focus. You know them, though. Not from a name, not from a relationship you can define, but from 1,000 small things. How they lean, the way they hand you the wooden bowl, how they let the moment settle instead of filling it. You take the bowl. You don't speak. Neither do they. You both sit, the fire on the hearth now soft and flickering. You eat slowly, letting the warmth of the food spread outward from your hands, your throat, your chest. The broth is simple, nothing remarkable. Root vegetables, maybe barley, definitely not enough salt. But it fills the space between you the way walls do, holding everything up without being seen. There's a faint tapping at the window, not from knuckles or knocks, but from the wind nudging a loose branch outside. The sound is steady, irregular. You imagine it will do that for the rest of the day and possibly forever. No one moves to fix it. It's just part of the kitchen now. You say something. You don't remember what. But the person laughs. A quiet, surprised sort of laugh. Like you said something only halfway funny and they were too tired to resist. You smile. Not broadly. Just enough. The candle flickers. The wind leans harder on the wall. The bowl in your hands is empty. You don't remember finishing it. But your body is warmer now. Calmer. Anchored in something that doesn't need a name. And then, gently, the room begins to dissolve, not like paper in water, but like fog when the sun gets bold. The table fades. The bench lightens beneath you. The fire turns to shadow. You don't feel yourself move. You just arrive back where you started. The clearing. The bonfire. The carved dog, still sitting dutifully on your knee. You blink once, twice. The smell of broth has left, replaced again by smoke and pine and the distant sweetness of damp leaves. You look around, half expecting the cupboard with the broken hinge to be here too, tucked between two tree trunks. But there is only forest, fire, and stillness. And that's all right. You settle again into your body, heavier now, like it's had a meal. You feel the muscles in your back press against the log, the shape of your boots in the dirt, the soft grip of your gloves against your lap. No rush. No return. Just a slow reacquaintance with the present. That kitchen, wherever it was, held something real. Not dramatic. Not profound. Just solid. You carry it now like a folded cloth in your pocket, a piece of something ordinary, something good that somehow remembered you. The fire shifts again. The breeze returns. The dog on your knee leans slightly, waiting. You stay just like that, warmed by more than flames. The fire has settled into a deep, steady rhythm, the kind that suggests it could burn like this for hours without needing anything from you. You haven't moved in some time, though your shoulders feel softer now, and your legs no longer register their position. The carved dog is back in your hand, resting between your fingers like it belongs there. You tilt it slightly, watching the way the firelight runs along its rough edges. It doesn't glow. It doesn't gleam. But it reflects just enough to remind you it's still here. Your mind, softened by the quiet and the warmth, begins to drift again. Not into memory this time, but into something more unspoken. A slow stretch inward. A hallway of thoughts you usually keep closed off until you're too tired to argue with yourself. You don't resist the turn. You simply follow where it leads. There was something you always meant to do. Not big. Not heroic. Just different. You once imagined yourself working with wood. Properly. Not like the half-measured whittling you do now when there's a stick and too much silence. You pictured a life in a small workshop, tools hung on the wall, shavings on the floor, the kind of dust that smelled like purpose. You would have made chairs, maybe. Tables. Boxes with lids that fit properly on the first try. Maybe you'd even try a flute, just to see if you could make something that sang without needing breath. You never did it, of course. War showed up first, or maybe you showed up to it. Either way, the choice slid quietly off the table, replaced with armor, marching orders, and the need to get good at surviving faster than you got good at anything else. The tools you learned to hold weren't for shaping, they were for keeping. Keeping people back. Keeping ground. Keeping time from taking too much at once. Still, every now and then, you think about that workshop. You picture a small window with uneven panes and a stool that's just slightly too low. You imagine your hands, marked in different ways, still finding the grain of the wood, still carving lines that follow the shape of something instead of trying to break it. You wonder, not longingly, just curiously, what would have happened if you'd chosen differently? If you'd said no earlier, if you'd walked east instead of north, if you'd apprenticed somewhere, no one carried a sword, and the only sharp thing in the room was a chisel you kept wrapped in cloth. Would your back still ache like this? Probably. Would your knees still complain every time it rained? Certainly. But would your mind feel less divided? You're not sure. And that's fine. These aren't regrets. They're just quiet questions. Soft ones. Like the kind you might ask a cat who wandered into your space and decided to stay. There was another thing, too. Music. Not as a job, not even as a skill. Just something you wanted to understand. You never learned to read it. You can't play anything well. But sometimes, in towns you pass through, you'd pause at the edge of a square where someone was playing a lute, a flute, a broken violin played with more heart than technique, and you'd stay longer than you meant to. You'd stand very still, not listening like a soldier watches, listening like a chair listens. You once bought a small harp from a merchant who swore it could charm birds from the trees. It couldn't. But you kept it for 3 seasons, plucking at it late at night until the strings gave up. You didn't replace them. You told yourself it was too expensive, too impractical. The truth was, you were afraid to find out that even with new strings, you'd still sound like someone trying to knit with spoons. You wish, a little, that you had tried more. Not in the way people usually mean it. Not in a desperate, rewrite your life sort of way. Just more. One song that didn't make your fingers ache. One carved box with corners that fit. One winter spent making something no one could use in battle. And then you smile, faintly, because you remember the time you tried to build a stool and it came out with 5 legs. The 5th leg wasn't even in the middle, it was just there, as if the stool had ambitions of becoming a fence. You kept it for months. People asked about it. You said it was a metaphor, though you never explained for what. That was enough to make them stop asking. You hold the carved dog a little tighter, and the memory softens back into the silence. You look around the clearing. Nothing here judges you. Not the fire, not the trees, not the stool you're sitting on, which somehow remains more structurally sound than the one you built. You exhale, a long, quiet breath, and you think, with the kind of calm that only comes from being deeply tired and not needing to hide it, that maybe it isn't too late. Not for grand reinvention, not for travel or mastery, but for something small, something kind. You could still carve a box. You could still learn 2 songs. You could still make a chair that holds up exactly 1 person for exactly 1 cup of tea. Maybe none of that would matter. Maybe no one would ever see it. But maybe that's not the point. Maybe the point is knowing you can. knowing your hands still want to try. The fire shifts again, not louder, just slightly more orange. The dog leans forward in your hand, as if considering the same idea. You glance at the trees beyond the light, then down at your boots, then back at the fire. The question doesn't press. It doesn't ache. It just sits with you now. Would it still matter? Would it still feel right? You don't know. But you sit with the question anyway. And for now, that feels like enough. The fire crackles, low and steady. It's no longer reaching for the sky, just resting in itself, radiating quiet heat like it has nothing to prove. You sit a little straighter, or maybe you just notice your spine again. The weight of the night hasn't changed, but your attention shifts, not toward the past, not toward what you haven't done, but to what might lie ahead, long past the edges of this forest. Not tomorrow, not next season, further. You wonder what this clearing will look like 30 years from now. 40, even. Will the trees still lean in just so, or will they have thinned out, pulled back by time and storms and whatever comes next? Will anyone still sit on this same log, staring at the same stubborn stars, wondering whether their knees are supposed to creak quite this much? You imagine someone younger. Not too young. Just new. Someone sent here for reasons that will never be explained to them properly. Maybe they'll have better armor. Or lighter packs. Or, if the world is lucky, shoes that don't try to eat your heels with every step. Maybe the fire pit will still be here, the rocks rearranged, the ashes long gone, but the shape of it persistent. A circle made by hands and habits. Would that person know you were here once? Probably not. The forest doesn't keep names. It remembers warmth, maybe. The heat of bodies. The pressure of boots in the mud. But names fade faster than moss. Still, you like to think some trace of you would linger. Not in the grand sense. Not legacy. Just presence. Like the faint warmth of a chair recently vacated. You glance at the carved dog again. By then, it'll be dust, unless someone tucks it away somewhere absurdly careful. And no one does that with tiny wooden dogs. You'd laugh at yourself if you tried. But still, the thought hangs there, not sad, just oddly companionable. What else will change? You imagine the tools soldiers carry will be different. Maybe sharper. Maybe quieter. Maybe less heavy, or more so depending on how the world tilts. But the tasks, those probably won't shift much. Someone will still be told to guard a path that no one walks. Someone will still sharpen a blade they hope never to use. Someone will still sit beside a fire and wonder whether they're supposed to feel something more than tired. The log beneath you might still be here, though you suspect it won't last. Wood has a way of bowing out without ceremony. It gives up slowly, crumbling in its own time. You admire that, in a way. A quiet exit. No speech. Just one less place to sit until someone finds another. The stars will be the same. Or close enough. The sky doesn't update itself much. You look up, letting your eyes soften against the branches. You've never learned the constellations, not properly. You've heard their names, the grand ones, the hunters, the bears, the cups and crowns, but they never stuck. You just think of them as shapes with better marketing. Still, someone else will look up at them too, years from now, and they'll see the same crooked triangle you always see to the west. You've always called it the tilted roof. No one else ever confirmed it looked like that, but you've never needed agreement to name things. You just like knowing what to call something, even if it's only to yourself. You wonder what this kind of work will look like in the future. Will soldiers still siege beside fires? Will there still be borders that need watching, walls that need checking, forests that need to be called secure by people who barely understand what that means? Maybe by then, people will have stopped pretending that peace comes from maps. Maybe they'll figure out how to build something better. But more likely, someone will still be carrying a list of places to be, someone else's orders folded into a pocket. They'll still be walking into strange woods, setting up camp, trying to make water boil faster than it wants to. You wonder if they'll have better rations. The kind that don't come with a texture you'd describe as chewy disappointment. Maybe they'll have food that tastes like food, instead of punishment softened by salt. Maybe they won't need food at all, just something they inhale or absorb through gloves. You wrinkle your nose at that. Eating, after all, is one of the few parts of the job you actually enjoy, when it goes right. And what of the cities? Well, they have changed so completely that a place like this will feel like myth. You think of stone towers being replaced by spires made of light, of dirt roads swallowed by glowing paths, of conversations carried through air instead of shouted across courtyards. You imagine someone stumbling across your old post and wondering how people lived with so much silence. How anyone managed with such slow news, such uncertain weather, such long waits between letters. Would they laugh at the way you sat beside a fire, carving a dog with a blunt knife and no artistic direction? Would they wonder why you didn't aim higher? Or would they, just maybe, understand it? Understand the comfort in small things, the relief in stillness, the importance of doing something that makes no difference but feels like your own. You glance at your gear, the straps fraying at the edges, the buckle that doesn't quite stay fastened, the helmet that still carries a dent you earned by tripping over a bucket. No battle, no glory, just clumsiness. But you kept it. Of course you did. Dents, after all, are how objects earn character. Maybe the future will have less clumsiness. Maybe boots will warn you before a rock is loose. Maybe cloaks will adjust to the wind without needing to be tied in 5 different ways that still let in rain. But then again, maybe not. Some things stick around, not because they're perfect, but because they work well enough and everyone's used to them. You sit in the quiet and picture it all. The future soldiers, the better gear, the vanishing log, the changing stars, the slow forgetting of names, the possible remembering of a crooked fire pit in the woods. You let the vision pass through you like mist. Not holding on. Not pushing away. Just breathing with it. There's a version of you that might have made it to that future. Not literally, not by body, but in spirit. In the way someone chooses to sit beside a fire instead of standing, watch a little longer. In the way they take out a piece of wood and start carving for no particular reason. In the way they wonder, for just a second, what it would be like to be a carpenter instead. You find the thought oddly comforting. Not legacy, not that grand. More like ressemblance. Echo. A familiarity passed forward, not because it was important, but because it was real. You close your eyes. You imagine someone in that distant future picking up a tiny wooden figure from the ground. It's missing a leg. The shape's unclear. But they turn it in their fingers and keep it. They don't know why. They just like how it feels in their hand. And maybe that's enough. The fire burns lower now, no longer lively, just loyal. It breathes slowly, like it's asleep with one eye open, a watchful warmth that asks for nothing but your company. You shift on the log, only slightly, and let your hand trail along your thigh until it finds the small wooden dog again. Still there. Still unimpressed. Your mind, now fully softened by the silence, begins to stretch into that in-between space, not memory, not planning, just small, harmless thoughts. The ones that arrive when the world finally stops asking for decisions. You let them come. They're light, slow, strange in that particular way that makes them comforting rather than confusing. You imagine, for a moment, that the carved dog in your hand isn't carved at all. That it's a real dog, just very, very well behaved. Perfectly still. Possibly magical. The kind that only moves when you're not looking. You picture it hopping off your knee once you fall asleep, stretching its legs, maybe trotting in circles around the fire. Not to guard you, just to enjoy the night. It wouldn't bark, just shuffle leaves. Occasionally nudge your boot like it's checking you're still there. Then you imagine it tidying up the camp. Not much, just nudging your boots into alignment, flicking stray pebbles out of the bedroll, dragging a bit of moss over the less dignified scuffs in your armor. Maybe it sighs while doing it, like it expected better from you. A very small, judgmental guardian. You think that wouldn't be so bad. The fire pops quietly. You blink, and another thought wanders in. What if the stool you're sitting on wasn't made of logs and rope, but something entirely different, something that reshaped itself based on your posture? You picture a seat that senses when your back is stiff and leans just enough to counter it. It would hum a little, maybe, like a cat does. Adjust as needed. Never complain. Definitely not something the quartermaster would approve of, which only makes it more appealing. You let the fantasy linger. What if the fire, too, had a mind of its own? Not wild or dangerous. Just cooperative. A companion fire. One that knew exactly when you wanted more heat and when you needed it to settle down. Maybe it could sense moods. Burn blue when you're calm. Burn orange when you're lost in thought. Flicker green when you're telling a lie, though you think that might be a problem during card games. Still, you could live with that. You've already sworn off card games ever since the incident with the cheese and the bishop. The trees above sway gently, their motion slow enough to pass for thought. You imagine briefly that the forest itself knows you're here, not in a mystical, all-seeing way, more like the way a tavern knows a regular. The trees recognize your pattern. They remember where you placed your bedroll last time. They expect you. Maybe they even left you a clearer patch of ground this time, just because they know you hate roots in the middle of your spine. You smile at that. A courteous forest. The dream of every tired traveler. Another thought curls in. What if, somewhere just behind you, far enough not to see, close enough to feel, there was a door? A small one. Wooden, round, a bit mossy at the base. It doesn't lead to anything grand. Just a short hallway and a warm room with a kettle, a window, and a stack of clean socks that fit perfectly. No explanation for its existence. No rules. You just turn the handle when you're ready, step inside, and sit. The socks are always your size. The kettle never runs dry. The room never questions where you've been. You don't walk through that door. Not now. You just enjoy knowing it might be there. You turn the wooden dog in your fingers again, and imagine that if you pressed its nose just right, something would happen. Not explosive. Not dramatic. Maybe it plays music, one song, always the same. Something faint and pleasant, like a lullaby whistled from the other side of a field. You picture yourself pressing it once, then forgetting about the sound until a bird nearby starts chirping in time. You chuckle quietly. The thought is too soft to be funny, but it still makes you smile. The wind shifts again. Cooler now, brushing against your cheek. You glance toward the trees and imagine that somewhere up in the branches there's a small, unseen lantern. It's not lit by flame. Not anymore. It glows when you think kind thoughts. Not dramatic ones. Just small kindnesses. You imagine it flickered once earlier when you left that extra piece of bark for someone who'll sit here next. Maybe it glowed faintly when you remembered the boy from the cooper's shop and hoped he still got decent fruit. You wonder what it would look like if all your small kindnesses had been lanterns. A trail of them, flickering gently behind you. A path of light so faint no one notices until they're already walking it. You sigh. Not heavily. Just enough to empty the lungs a little more than usual. Your eyelids grow heavier now. Not closing yet. Just suggesting. And still, the thoughts come, soft little impossibilities. Maybe the trees hum when you sleep. Not loudly, not melodically. Just a low, near-silent tone that keeps the wolves away and the dreams from turning sour. Maybe one of the stones near the fire is warmer than the others for no reason you've ever figured out. Maybe the stars are in different positions every night, but only move for people who fall asleep outdoors. None of these thoughts demand belief. That's what makes them comforting. They don't try to be true. They just keep you company. You lean back against the log. The fire settles again, quieter now. The carved dog, still resting in your palm, feels lighter than before. Nothing has changed. And yet the world feels just slightly more willing. The fire has dimmed into a soft cradle of light, its last few coals pulsing gently in the ash. There's no more crackling, no flicks of flame reaching upward, only a slow, reddish glow that hums with the warmth of everything it has already given. Nothing left to prove. Nothing left to burn. It just keeps you company now, like someone who doesn't speak but stays beside you anyway. The air is thick with stillness. Not silence. The forest still breathes, faintly. Leaves rustle with no urgency. A branch creaks in the distance. The wind nudges through the underbrush with all the weight of a passing thought. But all of it seems far off, tucked behind a layer of calm that now wraps the clearing. Your body has completely settled. You can feel the shape of your back against the log, the subtle press of your legs into the stool, the weight of your arms resting just so. Your breath no longer moves your chest in any meaningful way. It rises and falls without notice, quiet as moss. There's no tension to be held, no posture to maintain, no reason to shift. The muscles that once prepared for movement now remember what it means to simply exist. The carved dog is still in your lap, tilted on its side, one ear worn down just slightly more than the other. You haven't touched it in some time. You forgot you were holding it. But now, as your thumb brushes lightly over the edge, you feel it with a different kind of attention, not curious, not idle. Just aware. Present. The kind of awareness that exists without needing to do anything. Around you, the forest has faded into one continuous form. Trees, leaves, stone, sky, all blending into a single backdrop of quiet. Nothing stands out anymore. There are no sharp lines or bright edges. Just soft, blurred impressions. The log is part of the ground. The ground is part of the trees. The trees are part of the air. And you are somewhere in the middle, no more separate than a stone resting where it belongs. Your eyelids drift lower, not shut, just near shut. The flicker of firelight still touches the back of them in faint orange and red. It paints the inside of your vision with shapes that don't mean anything. You don't try to follow them. They don't lead anywhere. They just come and go. Thoughts move the same way now, not as sentences or memories, but as feelings that barely form before they fade again. A sense of time passes through you, but you don't track it. Minutes, hours, none of it asks to be measured. The night is wide and open, and there's nowhere else you need to be. The smell of smoke clings gently to the air. Not acrid, not thick, just enough to remind you of warmth, of cedar bark, of wet leaves crackling into steam. It weaves into your breath like a familiar lullaby you don't need to hum aloud. Even that scent begins to fade now, replaced by something deeper. Earth. Wool. Cool air softened by long use. You can't remember the last time you spoke. Not just here, tonight, but in general. Words feel distant, unnecessary. You've entered that soft part of the night where language unravels, where names and plans and conversations slide off like cloaks you didn't realize you were wearing. And in their place, there's only stillness. It's not the stillness of nothing happening. It's the stillness of everything having already happened. All footsteps taken, all sights seen, all thoughts thought. There is no more action to take, no more role to inhabit, no one left to impress. Just rest, vast and complete, like a field left fallow. You wonder, very faintly, if the fire will still be glowing by morning. You wonder if you'll still be sitting like this, or if your body will have finally eased itself onto the bedroll without asking. You don't know. You don't mind. The question is just something passing through, like a leaf floating across a pond. The light catches the edges of your armor. Just a hint. It doesn't glint. It barely reflects. You see it out of the corner of your eye, and don't turn your head. You just notice that it's still there, that you're still wearing it, though it feels lighter now. Like someone else's shell that you borrowed for a little too long and forgot to return. The stool beneath you gives another faint creak. Not because it's breaking, just because it's old and made of wood, and wood doesn't believe in perfect silence. You shift, barely. The sound becomes part of the stillness, too. Nothing disturbs anything now. Every motion, every sound, folds gently into the shape of the night. Above you, the stars remain where you left them. Or maybe they've moved and taken the whole sky with them. You're not looking anymore. You don't need to. You've seen enough stars for one lifetime. More than enough to believe they'll be there tomorrow. There is nothing to hold. Nothing to finish. No moment left that asks to be marked. Only the final warmth of the coals. Only the softness of your limbs. Only the low hum of a world that has stopped needing answers. You are still here, but not separate. Not watching. Not thinking. Just part of the night now. Part of the warmth. Part of the quiet. Part of the breathing earth. No goodbye. No conclusion. Only the last flickers of firelight, and then only the dark.